there. My name is Neeraja Arvamudan. I'm the director of the Ginsberg Center at University of Michigan. And at my distinct pleasure, I'm also part of the TRUCEN leadership group. TRUCEN, for those who really don't know this wonderful acronym we have, it's the Research University Community Engagement Network, which is a community of practice within Campus Compact. And as one of the part of the leadership committee, I get to lead this particular breakout group, and we're really excited to talk about faculty fellows and graduate student development programs. We're using a structure that we used in our TRUCEN retreat that was really successful, where we get to hear briefly from 4 different programs, and then you'll get a chance to ask your own questions and interact with each, at least 2 of the 4 presenters. So you get to choose your own adventure today. So I'm going to very briefly talk about, just to introduce this topic. We know that faculty fellow and graduate student development programs are often a cornerstone of community engagement, and they can be done in many different forms, and it's really helpful to learn from other models, existing models. And we've got 4 different institutions represented here, 4 different programs. They'll talk a little bit about their own experiences and what their lessons learned to be able to inform choices you might be thinking and considering for your own programs, whether you have an existing program or you're considering a new one, developing a new program yourself. So we will keep the presentations to 7 minutes each, and then we'll actually do breakouts in between the 2. We'll do 2 presentations and do breakouts and then do another 2 presentations so that you really have a chance to interact with folks. And it's my pleasure now to introduce Lori Flanagan-Cato from University of Pennsylvania. She's going to talk about the graduate certificate in community engaged STEM. And Lori is as an associate professor of psychology, uses she, her pronouns, and she's the program director. And if she weren't connected to this program, she would be doing work in education or environmental policy, in nonprofit education or environmental policy. So you can see her alternate world if it were in a sliding doors moment. And I'm going to turn it over to Lori to talk about her program.
So the program that I want to share with you today is a graduate certificate in community engaged STEM. And this is a program that I started with a graduate student about a year ago. And our rationale for starting this program was that, first of all, it's been Penn's mission since Penn was started by Benjamin Franklin, that the purpose of higher education is for knowledge that serves society. And so we felt like this would be a good way to extend that important mission of Penn. There were already a lot of community engaged STEM programs at Penn, but they weren't all known to be accessible to graduate students. And we also were observing that more and more academic jobs that hopefully our students would be competitive for, we're looking for students to have at least part of their training in some kind of inclusive STEM project. So we spent about a year reaching out to leaders in the graduate programs in engineering, the School of Design, the School of Veterinary Medicine, Dental Medicine, Nursing, Arts and Sciences, and Medicine. And we found that across all these different STEM schools at Penn, there was strong interest in having this kind of certificate for our students. And so our phase 1 to get things off the ground has been to have a certificate program based in the School of Medicine and the School of Arts and Sciences. And then we hope to build year after year, improving access for students in these other schools. So the components of the certificate are for graduate students to take 2 courses in community engagement. At Penn, we call them ABCS classes, or academically based community service classes. And we have a lot of these kind of classes for undergrads, but the goal of this program is to sort of build capacity for having these kind of classes for STEM graduate students also. A second requirement is for the students to participate in a monthly seminar where they can hear from faculty in sort of lots of different walks of community engagement to learn what all the opportunities are. And also some of the monthly seminars are set aside to hear from students and learn what the projects they're working on. It's also required that they engage in 40 hours of some kind of community engagement project. It has to be very programmatic. It can't be a lot of like one-off, stop by, a school or show up at some kind of science bee or something like that. It has to be some kind of really more immersive experience, and it has to be mentored also. So we really want them to be getting training in doing this and learn sort of the do's and don'ts of community engagement. And lastly, they need to do a capstone project. So they need to share with us, have some kind of product of the engagement experience that they had. So one way to get the project off the ground was to build my own ABCS class for graduate students. And this one is called Research and Community, Biomedical Science in the Urban Curriculum. And these are just some photos where some graduate students are working with kids in a local high school. They work with them every week for 10 weeks to help build their basic science skills. And also everybody had a lot of fun. See, I shared a few reflections of students in the class. They were required to write reflections as part of the class. So students were saying that the experience really improved their understanding of community engaged science. They also, as they really thought about what it meant to be in a university and work with the community, they saw it as a moral obligation. So they really started having really strong feelings about getting involved in this work. Penn, as I mentioned, has a lot of community engagement projects. These are just a list of a few. I'm sure that your institutions also have quite a few. But there's MathMates, there's Drosophila, there's Science Olympiad. There's just a whole bunch of ways that graduate students could get involved. They just often don't know about it. So the certificate became official last fall. And during our first year, we did have one student complete the certificate. And currently there's 6 more students that are working on the certificate. And I have a faculty advisory board with 10 faculty members that are about half from the School of Medicine and about half from the School of Arts and Sciences. Our first graduate is Erin Purvis. She was a PhD in neuroscience, and now she's a Civic Science Fellow at UC Irvine. So she was really passionate about this community engagement work and actually decided to go in that direction for her career. In case you're not familiar with civic science, their goal is to have thought leaders, bridge builders, change agents, and communicators working to learn about the community and bring science research together with the community. And this is just in closing another quote from a student in the ABCS class. Just finding it an eye-opening experience. A lot of times students working on their PhD in science, they're kind of in a bubble at the bench, a lot of hours a day. And for these students, it was a great chance to actually learn a lot more about what's going on in the community. So that's what I wanted to share, and I hope that we get to talk about your questions in the breakout groups.
Lori, you did such a good job. I didn't even have to give you your 1 minute reminder. This is amazing. So thank you for that. I wanted to highlight a couple of things I forgot to mention. One is I did put in the chat a link to a document that has the full agenda for today, including links to each of the presenters, their slides, and if there are resources related to what any of the presenters talk about that you'd like to share, there's a spot at the bottom for participants to add their own resources in related to these kinds of programs. And then in addition, if as you're listening presenters, if there are things that you'd like to add in addition to your slides, there's a spot for that as well. So we hope you'll contribute and get to learn from that. The other thing I wanted to share is in case many of you were not at the previous session, we also have the notes from that one, which was on Civic Engagement Minors, certificates, and distinctions. So wanted to share that link as well, which is basically a similar format to this one, summary of contacts and information from that session, because some of this work is interrelated, right? Minors and programs like this. So, whoops, that was it scared the crap out. All right, here we go. All right, so we are going to go to the next presenter, who is Mindy Levin. She is the founder and director of Johns Hopkins Source and an associate practice professor at the Bloomberg School of Public Health. And she uses she, her pronouns. And she helped develop the program and continues to support the implementation and training in the program. And the program is the Service Learning Academy. So I'm going to let Mindy go next. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the introduction. Are you seeing my screen?
Yep, we are.
Fabulous. Okay. So again, today I'm going to be talking briefly about our Johns Hopkins University Source Service Learning Academy. I'm going to give you the origin, some highlights, and the impact of our program. And before I jump into that, I always have to kind of give a little bit of a quick background on Source. We are the Community Engagement and Service Learning Center for Johns Hopkins University's 3 graduate level health professional schools, the schools of public health, nursing, and medicine. And our work is really to engage those health professional schools and our Baltimore communities in mutually beneficial partnerships that promote health and social justice. And to just give you a few quick Source highlights, we do partner with over 100 community-based organizations in Baltimore City, and each member of our Source team is a designated liaison to a subset of those partners. We have an opportunities guide that we've developed with our partners, which is available online and interactive. We have a number of preceptor training modules that have also been developed with community partners. We do special events throughout the academic year, and we have a whole host of programs, curricular, co-curricular, and lots of supports that we do. That kind of brings me to giving you some background about our Source Service Learning Academy. So for many years, we had students that were approaching us and really wanted an opportunity to apply theory to practice and have that really integrated into their academic experience, while simultaneously having faculty members that were interested in utilizing critical service learning pedagogy, but just didn't feel they had adequate training to do so. So there was those 2 pieces that were coming. At the same time, the accrediting bodies for schools of public health, nursing, and medicine, we saw more requirements coming out that would help students better understand social determinants of health or improve their competencies in health equity. We were even involved with a National Academies report around the framework for educating health professionals to teach them more about the social determinants of health. And we had a whole section that we talked about service learning. And that was a really big driver for this because we got more support at our institutional level because this was now a requirement through accreditation. And of course, we had community partners that were requesting things that we felt could be answered through critical service learning courses. And when we started this program, I went to the president of Johns Hopkins University and he gave us initial grant to get started. I do want to mention that we do utilize critical service learning pedagogy in the work that we do. So it's very much coming from a social justice lens. Now, the Service Learning Academy itself is a 1-year, an academic year, cohort-based, extremely comprehensive program that equips faculty together with community leaders with the necessary tools and methods to develop either a critical service learning partnership and or courses. And we start off the program with a 2.5-day summer seminar that our folks have basically called it our boot camp to get people started and introduce all these concepts. And then throughout the year, we have monthly webinars. So on the odd months, it's just the current cohort. And then on the other months, it's actually all past and current fellows, faculty, and community alike that join us. We also do one-on-one advising throughout the entire academic year. So each one of our team members is paired with one of the cohort members to support their needs. We have a Microsoft Teams site where we are sharing our resources and there's a lot of discussion that happens there. And we also have our Source Service Learning Academy manual with some great resources. There's a fantastic leadership team that's involved. There are a few of us from Source, myself and our Associate Director, Dr. Tyler Dareth. And then we also have 3 senior faculty fellows. These are faculty from the schools of public health and nursing at Johns Hopkins that have been through the program and have taught and continue to support others in their service learning. So Dr. Salim, Bauer, and Warren. And then we also have 2 senior community fellows. Similarly, they've been through the program and they've been involved with a lot of service learning activities. So Tashikali Ackett and Jason Green serve in that capacity. There's a few different things that we are aiming to do through the Service Learning Academy itself. And we want everybody to understand and utilize critical service learning pedagogy. We engage our students and colleagues in critical reflection around power, privilege, and ethics. For each of our faculty fellows, they are designing and then implementing their service learning course, and our community fellows learn to design a service learning project, and they're actually bringing that to life in partnership with the Hopkins Health Professional faculty. And then, of course, we're building new or strengthening partnerships between our community organizations and our faculty members. A few other objectives that we work to do, again, engaging in dialogue with colleagues. We want people to understand the role of critical service learning in higher ed, and particularly around the health professions, and a few other objectives that you see here on the screen as well. So I do want to share a few exciting outcomes that have come about from our Service Learning Academy. We're in currently our 13th year. So we have had 13 cohorts of the program that have been completed and underway with our 13th. There's been 94 faculty and 36 community leaders that have been trained through the program. And in the last 4 years, we've actually welcomed faculty from outside of Johns Hopkins. And we've had faculty from 20 other institutions that are involved in our Service Learning Academy. We've continued to grow the number of 4-credit service learning courses that are offered at our institutions. And we also have an IRB approved data repository, which allows us to do some publications and share more about the results of our work. We have a standard service learning course evaluations that go to our students that are involved, as well as to our community partners. We also have an official service learning course designations through our Committee on Academic Standards at our schools as well. A lot has happened in terms of scholarship and advocacy efforts, and that's really been because we have this great community of folks that are utilizing critical service learning. And of course, that means that we've enhanced our collaborative capacity as well as focused on ethical engagement. There's some importance of the work that I like to just on a higher scale, if you would mention. Again, we've had evidence of this strengthening our health professional education. It's fabulous to see people that are making sure that we are doing authentic community engagement and responding to community identified needs, reciprocities in place. We are continuing to break those cycles of harm and inequity when you talk about community academic partnerships. So it goes beyond just the service learning pedagogy, but it really is just our approach to community engagement, and faculty and community partners have talked about how this is something that's used in so many other aspects of their work. And again, we're institutionalizing effective, justice-oriented community engagement through these long-term partnerships that we've developed. I wanted to share just a quick few samples of some publications that have come out. The first one that I'll mention is from this
less than a
academic
minute
year.
left. Sorry.
Thank you, no problem. In 2024, we have an article that came out around community partner experiences in our service learning development program. We think this is a pretty unique aspect of our work of the faculty and community together. And then I'll shoot your eyes down to the third listing here, which was one talking about preparing public health professionals to address social injustices through critical service learning in pedagogy and health promotions a couple years back, but we did win paper of the year. And then the last thing I want to share is this. These are the wonderful people of our 13 cohorts have gone through our Service Learning Academy and continue to be champions for the work that we do. So thanks for allowing me the opportunity to share.
Thanks so much, Mindy. So two very different programs, but also some through lines. So we're going to give you a chance now to ask your own questions. Thanks for those of you who maybe joined midstream. So what we've done is had 2 people present on their programs. Lori from University of Pennsylvania's graduate certificate in Community Engaged STEM, and then Mindy from Johns Hopkins on the Service Learning Academy that she just shared about. So you're going to get a chance to ask your own questions. We're going to give you 15 minutes and you get to choose your own adventure. You can decide which program you want to learn more about or ask questions of, and then we'll come back and do the next 2 presentations. So we're going to open the breakouts now. Looks like folks are back. I hope you had I know I got to visit both rooms, which was really lovely, and there was good discussion in both when I was there. So I hope you're ready for the next 2. So just as a reminder, for those who might have come later, we have this document that shares both the agenda, but also contacts of different folks, as well as their slide decks and resources. If you have additional resources, please feel free to add them yourself under the attendee links and resources. And we've got our next 2 presenters I have the pleasure to introduce. So we'll do the same format. We'll have Dovev and Ruth do theirs 7-minute presentations, and then we'll do a breakout. And then we'll do a short closing at the end to get our takeaways. I do wonder, before we move on, though, is if there are any takeaways from the discussion that you'd like to share. anybody has something they feel like that was a aha moment or a point of reflection from the conversation you just were in.
I'll just quickly share that I'm excited to hear that there's other institutions that are looking to build on this kind of work for graduate students. And anyway, I'm excited to hear the progress and share more in the future.
Thanks, Lori. Um, Yeah, and I really appreciate both Sarah and Stephanie's comments about how, these coming here to sort of see how it might inspire your own efforts and also that programs change over time. I know that when I've created programs and other roles I've been in, it felt like you had to get it right the first time. And I think it's very much iterative. And that's a lot of what I was hearing is how, you have an initial idea of what the structure could be. Some things work because of the particular environment, some things don't. You try some more things. These are just a series of experiments. So how are we in orienting to that? How are we hearing that in the sessions you're listening to, both what you just heard and what will be there? Um, yeah, and I think the other thing that I really enjoy about being part of Truckin and Compact is just not being so isolated in the work, right? So that each of us are in our own institutions. We kind of get, we know our own environment really well, and it's really easy to kind of get your head in the sand and forget that there's other folks who are kind of been in this with you, and you're not alone, and you can always reach out. One of the reasons we have Campus Compact and Truckin is so that you can rely on each other, right? If there's a question, now there's some people who've done this before, and everybody has always been really supportive and helpful when I've reached out to be like, can I ask you a question about this? And folks are really great about that. So that's one of the reasons we wanted to make that visible. And I do want to give Bobby a shout out while she's on the Zoom that her leadership with Campus Compact and her support of Truckin has been really instrumental. Like she is the queen of experimentation, and I think it's really helps everyone to feel like we can try things and have them not work, and that is okay, and that we can keep improving, and that is really helpful. So, and that's what I encourage all of you to think about as well. So, to that end, we're going to move on to Dovev from University of New Hampshire, who's going to be talking about the Sustainability Fellowships Program. Dovev is an assistant dean for graduate student affairs and assistant vice provost for outreach and engagement. Um, and he did not share with me the questions. I'm going to have him answer what your alternative career would be.
Sure. So sorry, I thought I put that in there, but so I had thought I put that in that I would probably be doing some kind of climate policy or action work at the state level or local level because that seems relevant and that's where really where the good work has largely been and is going to be for the next few years, and that's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately.
Wonderful, though. Thank you so much. That wasn't to call you out. That was mostly just because I was trying to find the information. So why don't you go ahead and get started, and we'll look forward to hearing about the program.
Great, thank you. All right, well, thanks so much to Narija and Bobby and the whole Compact team, as I'm a fairly new member to Compact and Truckin. I know about Compact for a while. I started diving in really about a year ago, and I could not amplify what you just said more, Narija, about this is a space for, I really appreciate the peer learning, the support, knowing that, oh, other people do this and that's actually good to promote. I'd always, sometimes you get these ideas and you're like, am I by myself? So this has been a wonderful cohort of folks to really soundboard and get those supportive ideas. So thank you for that. I'm glad to be here. So I'm going to talk about one other, I have a long, like many of you have, my title gets longer every year. So I can't say it in one breath anymore. My third title is I'm also a fellow at our Sustainability Institute, which is where the project that I'm going to present on comes out of. I've been with them for about a decade now. And one of my two things I work with them on is a sustainability fellowships program. So this pairs undergraduate and grad students, about 50-50 mix with community partners. And that's partners from every single sector. So NGOs, civil society, industry, state, government, municipalities, you name it. We've had fellows work in there. And that's been a really nice way to kind of have a diverse set of experiences that really cut across the multi-level governance of things that need to get solved. And so what this is in reaction to is that I'm sure many of you have worked with partners for many years, and we see capacity issues on their end across the board. So we've been trying to really help to solve or at least address those problems through some student engagement work that we do. So just real quick background on how it works. This is our 17th year, I believe, that we've been in effect. We have one full-time staff person, Alexis, who's amazing, who basically she's kind of the day-to-day person. She's unbelievable, and works on this year-round. And then we have a kind of grouping then of 3 folks like myself. I have really maybe 3-4 hours a week on average to spend on this through a small fellowship that I have. And then during the summertime, we have some additional advisors that hop on to help out with the fellows advising as well. It's a summer-long full-time immersion program. So what that means is 10 weeks during the summer, starts in late May and goes through roughly mid-August. So 10 weeks at 40 hours a week. So these fellows are really, that's their summer, is they're going right in there. They're committed to not doing other work during the summer. They really are, it's dedicated work specifically with the community partner that they're matched up with. It's fully stipended. Grad students get $8,000 this summer. It's about $20 an hour. That's funded through, we've had a grant for quite some time through a very generous donor. And that $100,000 a year pays for a couple of things. One is some of our in-kind time between myself and then the full-time person I mentioned. Then also we've had anywhere from recently 40 to 50 projects per summer. The vast majority of those are funded by the partner. So they come up with the money, but we do reserve roughly 8-10 slots a year for partners that are either kind of starting up. It's a small town that doesn't have funding, but a really compelling project that we think could be really impactful. So we do use some of that funding to then basically provide the stipend for the student on behalf of that project. One project per partner, or excuse me, per fellow. So what we want to do is make sure that we're really prescriptive in what the project is designed to get done. So we don't send them out and kind of internship it where it's like, well, just show up, you'll do the 40 hours, we'll figure it out. We are very much the opposite of that, where we're coming in, it's one overall single project. It could be a greenhouse gas inventory, it could be a climate action plan, it could be any number of things, but we want to have a very clear deliverable at the end that was both educational for the student and simultaneously equally impactful for the community partner, where it's a tool or a product that they can use to advance their goals in sustainability. And as I said, these are, projects that we do across the entire sector of different types of entities. And, just a kind of little sampling here of different projects that we focused on: renewable energy development, social justice and equity, carbon emissions, a lot of food work. We have a big food systems research kind of entity here, and lots of other things relative to sustainability. Scaling up, as I said, we started back in 2008. I was in the very first cohort as a PhD student way back then. We had 8 fellows, and it's a very different, I can say this from experience, very different fellowship than it was back then. We've really scaled it in terms of both, kind of how we deliver it, what we're delivering to the community partner to get an impact out of this, but then also the number of fellows. We've gone up to from 8 our first year to we had 50 last summer. That may be a little too much, to be honest with you. We think that that was probably stretching the bounds, at least under our current staffing of, what we want to make sure is that we have a high touch approach to it, which means, I'll get to that in a second, but we want to make sure, again, we're not just taking the fellows application, looks good, here is your fellow community partner, good luck, we'll see you in August. I'll get to this in a second, but we really, really, really prize, and we notice what makes us unique is that we have this kind of scale while also having really high touch with our students. And it's also been very competitive. I put that number down there. We tend to get, roughly, 300 to 400 applications. This past summer, there were 350 for 50 slots. So we, the part of my job I actually don't like. It's great to be competitive. It is a bummer. We get really high level applications across the board. So, it comes down to these tiny little interview differences, and we have to unfortunately turn away a lot of really great students. But that does show the prestige and the reputation of the program as well. So as I said, what makes us, I think, particularly unique is both the impact that we're delivering to the community partner that's doing the project, but also that, again, we're high touch. That is really indebted to a few structural things that we do in the program. One is, from the beginning, we take our RFP process very seriously. So we're actually working right now We spent about 2 months just kind of honing the RFP to make sure that we're asking the right questions of the potential project. Who's the mentor? What's the impact? How are you going to mentor the fellow? Can you actually, we essentially do almost recommendations for that project to make sure that we know that they're a good entity that's going to show up and, work with the student the way that they need to. And then a lot of it that it comes down to is a project that they're proposing feasible, right? So it sounds like all of you will get a, RFP that's just, it's way too big. It's a dissertation and you can't do that in 10 weeks. So we either say, maybe come back next summer with a more kind of honed down and focused idea, or in cases where we're like, that's a really good idea, let's just kind of take one piece of it. And so we do a lot of finessing with the different RFP solicitations that come in.
Go ahead. You have got 1 minute left.
Oh, geez, I'm sorry. We also do a work plan that really prescribes what the students are going to do to make sure they know what they're doing week to week. And it would break down the 50 fellows into cohorts of roughly 5 or 6. They meet weekly together with an advisor on one of them to check in. How's it going? Are you getting the work done? What are challenges, et cetera, et cetera. High impact, I'll save that for the breakout room, but I will give a couple examples after we hop off of just kind of some of the different things that we think are just really demonstrating that, again, this is not just like the fellow goes in, has a good time, good experience, but these are things that these different entities in the state, industry, NGO perspective are key prongs of the work they're trying to get done. And we're very proud of that. Collaboration is a big part of this. We look at that both from the fellows standpoint, as well as the site, as well as the alumni. We're doing more and more every year to make sure that there's just this kind of virtuous feedback cycle to keep these fellows. It's not just a summer long experience. We want them to be engaged. And we have a lot of fellows that come back to either be mentors, which is really cool, and or are now engaged in other different sustainability based projects that we're doing at UNH with our different partners as well. So what's next? Do I have 30 seconds, Narija, or should I hop off there? All right, 30 seconds, real quick. So one thing that we are hearing a lot of, and this is a good problem to have, but at the end of the summer, we'll do a kind of go around with all the different mentors from the community partner sites. And what we hear constantly is that was awesome. Now she's gone. That fellow's amazing. Now what? And so we're trying to do more that we can now extend these kinds of projects into the academic year, and hopefully starting to pair those even further to align them with grad students' research projects like theses and dissertations. So that's our next step. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Silva. I know there's so much that we want to be able to share about our programs, and I know there will be a lot of great questions for everything you've shared. Our next person, our last but not least, Ruth Curry, who's the program coordinator for Community Engaged Teaching, Learning, and Research at Northwestern University. She's going to talk about Northwestern University's graduate program in training civic scholars.
Hi, everyone. Really nice to be here. I'm actually talking not just about one program, but a suite of programs that we offer graduate students, especially PhD students at Northwestern Center for Civic Engagement. Our graduate engagement opportunity there in the top left corner has been kind of a pillar of the center for as long as we've been around. So it's been ongoing for 15 years. And then I was hired 6 years ago, basically to build out the rest of this suite of opportunities. So we have 2 credit-bearing quarter-long practicum programs, GEO, which is open to students from all 70 of our PhD programs, as well as the Chicago Humanities Initiative, which is targeted at our humanists and humanistic social scientists. We have graduate assistantships, one at CCE, so that replaces departmental expectations for teaching or RA-ships, and then a couple at Black archives across Evanston and Chicago, where we help build capacity. We also have open registration workshops, so a little bit lower hanging fruit for students that can't commit for an entire quarter or for an entire year, as with the graduate assistantships. And then paid and volunteer leadership opportunities in our other programs, which are more oriented to undergraduate participants, but where we hire graduate students as mentors, as program coordinators, and as leaders. So I'll see if we get to kind of like the philosophy of doing things this way. I hope we can, because I think there are strengths and weaknesses to not having just kind of one program and one cohort, but trying to offer as many mechanisms as possible for graduate students who have very different departmental responsibilities, very different, varying levels of required courses versus freedom in their coursework, different expectations about how often they're in the lab or able to work independently. So just to give you a couple of examples of the ways that students interact with our programs and what they carry out of them. Connie is probably, and by the way, our practicum programs in particular, we have now served about 200, mostly PhD students, a couple of master students as well, over the last 15 years. And we pair them through this practicum. They both take a graduate level course and then are paired with organizations all across the city of Chicago and Evanston. So Connie is maybe your kind of typical vision of a community engaged scholar. She came to GEO in her very first year, knowing that she wanted to directly connect her research questions and priorities with what mattered to our local communities. So we paired her with a domestic violence organization, and she sort of leveraged that relationship into a number of research collaborations addressing provider burnout and tech-facilitated abuse. Christian, another example of someone who came to a practicum program and then extended that 10-week relationship into something over multiple years. He's a little bit different though, because I'm not sure that Shai and his collaboration with the Guild Literary Complex affected his dissertation or his academic trajectory, but it built these skills for public humanities work that connect institutions and communities, in this case, internationally. Ola Banke was one of our Black Metropolis GAs. She herself was a dance scholar and actually had an MA in archives, although she said, I've never worked in an archives. I just got all the theory and none of the practice. So she worked for 6 months with 2 community organizations in Chicago to build archives for Black dance organizations. And just a final example, Allison was a master's student in counseling. As some of you might experience, it's a bit trickier to work with students who are in 1 or 2 year long programs. They have intensive coursework, and they also have less time to get to know the communities and build those relationships. But that is the public writing workshop has offered, which I started during the pandemic, because it seemed like a good alternative mode of kind of thinking about community engagement. She was able to write an op-ed that became about her experience as a counselor in training, that became like a very important resource for her profession. So just a couple of examples of that work. I also wanted to mention that we have reinvigorated and reimagined our Faculty Fellows program since the pandemic. We're doing this in a very improvisational way, which is not in a top-down, here's what it's going to be. We're going to meet 3 times a year. We're going to offer each faculty fellow $1,000, which is kind of what it looked like pre-pandemic. But instead to feel our way through with the 9 faculty member who we chose to experiment with, what is actually going to make the most impact, and is based on their priorities for their own growth as community engaged scholars and teachers. So the kinds of, and by the way, all of this is also based on the fact that we have no endowment and we have less money now than we did before the pandemic to support these programs. So we're a little bit trading more on administrative support, guidance, cohort building, camaraderie than we are on some of our other units at the university that can offer course releases or significant stipends. So just to give hope to those of you who are interested in faculty fellows programs but don't have the finances to kind of develop on the fellowship part of that, or the traditional expectations of the fellowship part of that. So right now our kind of fellow collaborations really run the gamut from pretty, like small supports around, developing bus tours that can accompany course content to a 5-year NIH-funded grant in which we do a huge amount of work in recruiting partners and students to participate. So I just thought this might be interesting to talk about later in our breakout sessions, but it just in the spirit of kind of intellectual honesty and self-reflection, what are kind of the strengths and weaknesses of this approach to developing programming for graduate students and faculty? So, these were very organic. When I was hired, I was not told here are the suite of programs that you need to design. It was much more about finding opportunities and finding places where I could align whatever the university priorities were and the kind of emergent needs of our students with the priorities of our community partners. It's definitely a big tent approach. So like an incredibly diverse set of students with different kind of priorities and interests. Multiple points of entry. So there's no designated path that students have to take to work with us or with our communities. Super tailored. So every single in those practicum programs and in the GA programs, like, yeah, high touch, as Dovev said, and highly tailored based on the student interests and negotiate with community partners for mutual benefit. And a lot of flexibility, as I mentioned, with the Faculty Fellows program, rather than designing things in advance, kind of building as we go. But I also, of course, wanted to name the potential liabilities of that approach. So we do not, at least I do not operate on a 5-year plan, which I think is sometimes bureaucratically helpful when you have to justify to your powers that be why you're here and what you're doing. We're more improvisational than that. The big tent means that there's a wide spectrum of motivations for why students participate. I lean into that. I'm very happy and excited to work with social justice motivated students who are looking to connect their profession to their civic and political commitments. I'm also happy to help the international student who has developed a specialty in data visualization, get a little bit of work experience to make it more possible, to widen their professional opportunities post-graduation.
Lisa, you have about 1 minute, a little bit less than 1 minute.
Yeah, I'm wrapping up. Multiple points of entry also means that students come with hugely different levels of experience. This would be true anyways. We have PhD students, of course, who have come off of 10-year careers in nonprofits or teaching in classrooms for 10 years. And we have students who are just out of undergrad. So that's already built into the graduate experience. But definitely, we're working with students where they're at, which can be very different places, even in the same program. Highly tailored, as you can imagine, administratively demanding to be constantly matchmaking. And then any Catholics in the room can help me pronounce this word. Casuistic. Yeah, I mean, to a large extent, we are working case by case to develop what kinds of collaborations we're fostering with faculty or with students. And there are some downsides to that. But yeah, very happy to talk more about these programs or kind of the philosophy that I'm laying out here.
I have so many thoughts about this. This is amazing. So I am excited to have you all get a chance to talk with each of our second set of speakers. So again, we'll have Caitlin give us breakout options, and you get to choose your own adventure, Northwestern or University of New Hampshire. I'll pop into both again and try to give you a bit of a heads up about how much time you have left. We'll have 15 minutes for this part. For staying. Thanks to all of you for the conversations you've been having. I'd love to hear, as we're getting close to the end of our time together, what takeaways you've gotten from the 4 different presentations and your conversations. I have some thoughts of my own, but I'd love to hear from all of you. You can put it in the chat or unmute.
I have I guess a reflection, and I think during, this time where, I mean, the world feels like it's on fire and there's just, like, as everybody has said, a lot to do and not enough resources. I think I take, or at least after this conversation, it's been really heartwarming for me to just know and see, even though I was on, my camera was off, other people who are thinking about the same things, experiencing some of the same challenges, and then coming up with really creative ways to work through both systems and institutions that really weren't necessarily built to focus and prioritize community engagement, and also to elevate that, particularly for our faculty members. And so it's just been heartwarming to listen to everybody speak and to share different ideas. And I think, a lot of things have been percolating for me, but just really grateful for the network and the opportunity, and for TRUCEN to create that, for creating the space.
So glad to hear it, Fatima. I think so much about what roots us in, what maybe drew many of us to community engagement, right, is the opportunity to be in community. And I was just saying to my staff today, we cannot be in community if we don't model that ourselves. And how are we in community? And I think about that work that we are doing. And I think TRUCEN is trying to create that, and Campus Compact is trying to create that. And I think it's harder to do this work in isolation. And so, what are the opportunities you have to build on the conversations we're having today with each other? I hope you get to have follow-up conversations. And, I'd love to hear a little bit more. We just had very short amount of time to talk in our breakouts. So really encourage you to keep the relationships and the connections going, because that's also where our strength can come in. Other reflections or thoughts?
I would say this is something that I also kind of heard a bit when I was at the Compact meeting in April last year in Denver. But I would just be curious, maybe there's a follow-up conversation with this group and others about, at the grad level, I kind of get the sentiment that it's often not totally clear to grad students or their faculty that doing this work is okay and that it's valuable towards their research. And so I don't think I would be one to quickly push back on that, but I'm wondering if other people have that sentiment or that feeling. And if so, if there are some, different ways that people approach that, or there are models that we can point to say that's actually, really short-sighted.
I think there's a lot. I mean, I'm jumping in only because I maybe didn't wait long enough. So if other people have thoughts.
I would just echo, I think that Doga has a good point, that the student that did finish the certificate at my university, she insisted to her committee that she put her community engagement work in her dissertation. And so that was really unusual. Usually you just have your real experiments in your dissertation. So she's trying to create precedent and culture that community engagement can actually be part of your training and part of your thesis. So I'm just sharing it out there that, maybe we can learn from her bravery of pushing her committee on that. She told me that during her defense, they asked 0 questions about that part of her work, but at least, she has it out there that this is, part of her training and part of her, academic aspirations.
Ruth, you'd also unmuted for a sec there.
Oh, well, I'll just respond instead to what Lori said. And this is, which is, this is a good reason to go to your students' defenses, is because you can be the one that asks.
Very good point.
We're trying to promote relationships with faculty across different departments, and then also, of course, graduate students as well. And it is unfortunate that we feel like we have to spell out the immediate benefits to them to just get that initial buy-in, where we'd love for it to be because it's important to do, and because it's something we're passionate about. But it's like we have to get our foot in the door first. So one of the last TRUCEN lightning session, someone from University of Delaware kind of just recommended almost don't even call it community engagement, because that sometimes that's a turn off. So which it shouldn't be, but so you can either fight that and continue to use that terminology and promote it, or adjust the language to get them to still do the work, which I would argue is more important. So we're really focusing a bit more on broader impacts and how that can be beneficial to graduate students and instructors and researchers who are trying to figure out, what's the connection between my research and my scholarly work and community effect and impact. So again, it's kind of drawing the horse to water. It's not what we'd love, but I think it's also just the necessary work for the stage that we're in right now.
So just as I'm really conscious of time and I don't want to keep to people too late, but I really love this conversation. I want to reflect a few things that I heard both in the conversations that we listened to all the speakers as well as in the breakouts. So there are a whole, I think, a series of questions and what the presenters shared around how to get buy-in for the effort, both in terms of motivation of the participants, but also institutional support. So that was a little bit of that conversation that we're having at the end there. And that buy-in for support, I think I go back to Ruth's thing where you said, multiple points of entry, multiple motivations. So thinking about what might work in your institution because of the students you have might not work, or the faculty you have might not work at another institution. So thinking about how do you cast that net wide, what's going to resonate, right? That's a lot of what we're doing, is trying to bring more people into this work so that's one question I have for you all. What's your motivation? Are you trying to expand the number of people who do this work? Or are you trying to deepen those who already are committed to it? It doesn't have to be an either or, but those are different goals. And that might also inform how you go about framing it, right? So some people, actually, it makes a lot of sense to move away from community engagement if it's not bringing in people and what you're trying to do is expand. But for others, taking away community engagement might actually reduce the visibility of the work to get institutional support. So it's really being strategic, which is what I hear all of you doing, is how are you strategic in the choices you're making, in the time you have, in the resources you have, in the population you're trying to serve. And then that was a little bit of what I also heard in a set of questions around how to decide on the structure, right? Which is a lot, again, there isn't one right structure. So I think thinking about what works for you, Ruth's approach of being sort of cast the net wide and try a lot of different experiments might not work for you because of maybe your own approach. Maybe you're not comfortable. I can think of a couple of my staff who, I think would much prefer a structure. And for others who, where that experimental approach works really well. So just thinking about what works for you, what works for your institution and for the students you're working with. And I hear a lot about the impact and how you demonstrate impact. And there's so much that I heard about the value of the relationships that folks make, the way you're drawing in people and keeping people in the fellows programs that you have, right? That you're, once a fellow, always a fellow, that idea of that, you're creating not only the learning of the folks who participate, but you're creating a culture change in those who continue to be part of the world you've envisioned. And I think that speaks a lot to the work we try to do here in community engagement, right? That where it's not simply about outcomes, it's about culture change. And that work is going to be just as important, if not more so, in the months and years ahead. And so how are we paying attention to the language that's being used, what is being used by institutional leaders that we can connect to, right? And to say, this is how this is still relevant, even if maybe the language or the approach is slightly has to pivot. With that, I do love a good summary. So with that, I really want to thank all of you for joining us. I want to thank Campus Compact and Bobby and the TRUCEN team for creating these opportunities. I think the structure, we'd love your feedback on whether the structure works. I really appreciated the really rich conversations, and let us know how it works or doesn't for you, and we'll continue to iterate. And I really appreciate the suggestions of ideas of other topics, so feel free to do that as well.
And thank you, Nirja, for this incredible facilitation. And sorry, I have traveled a lot in this hour and a half. So thank you for wrestling with me on that. We can't wait. We're going to get all the presentations out. Thanks for contributing to that Google Doc. And it seems like just hearing the takeaways that there's some really rich conversation here to bring together these kinds of programs and people who are thinking this way in some probably deeper ways, particularly because there's so many folks who are kind of in the process of developing, which is really exciting.
I think about like layers of strategy, right? The strategy of starting, strategy of continuing and sustaining, strategy of building institutional buy-in, thinking about those layers. And we could probably do a series like that on different topics. Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.